everyone. In this lesson, I like to talk about the theme of the course and what are the topics and what is the approach of this course. Okay, so for that reason, I'm going to share a screen with you. All right, the theme of the course is functions. Okay, the theme of the course is functions. So what is a function? A function is a rule that assigns each input exactly one output. Okay, so a function is a rule, and we're going to study the rules. Okay, so if we put a picture, okay, for the role of the function, input, and then we have a function. Okay, we have a function. We use shorthand notation f. Okay, the function would take input. Okay, so that would take input. Input, you can have any name for input. Typically, we use x for input. Okay, and then it produces output. Anything that satisfies this definition is called a function. So we're going to study functions. After we study all of the functions, okay, and their types, okay, there are variety of functions, and then you will be brought to the door of calculus. You will be brought to the door of calculus, and starting from calculus 1 course, okay? So all of these functions is the topics of this semester. So what are the functions? Okay, let me give you some examples. You have learned a lot of them. It's just you may not pay attention, or you may not realize that there are so many of them falls into this category. So these functions are, for example, one of the function could be f of x equal to x, right? It could also be, or you might have learned this as y equals to x, right? And you may have also learned other functions such as, which is the tweak of this function, is y equals to mx plus b. Okay, so all of these are linear functions, and this one is being the simplest. And other functions maybe is f of x, right? Oops, why did I have that? Okay, maybe f of x equal to a constant. That's a function too. And so by now you know that you have learned a lot of functions, right? Another function may be f of x equal to x squared, right? Another function may be f of x equals to the absolute value of x. And f of x, x raised to the power 3. All of these are called functions. So maybe 1 over x. Okay. And their variations may be something you have seen before, right? X squared plus bx plus c, right? So this is a quadratic functions, general form. And there are variations of absolute value of x. There are variations x raised to the power 3. And another one, f of x equals to cubic root. And I call these functions basic functions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in the first week, oh, there's another one, square root. Okay, of course. square root of functions. So that make 8 functions. So you can see in the first week, we study basic mathematical principles. They are very important, truth table. And then we go on to study these basic functions and the absolute value function, square root function, cubic root, x power 3, and reciprocal functions, and so on and so forth. And then after we study all of these functions, we introduce some important concepts such as one-to-one, one-to-one again. One-to-one is a very important concept. And then from one-to-one function, we cover inverse function, composition of one-to-one function with its inverse, increasing function, decreasing function, even function, and odd function. So these concepts, right, they all belong to the rules and how we classify different kind of functions. And then after quiz number 4, we study or review logarithm functions and exponential functions. Your homework will be on these topics, okay? So then you can see just on this piece, right? We're gonna study all of these functions in the first week, okay? The next function we're gonna study, of course, is exponential functions, right? 2 to the power x, 3 to the power x, 3 to the power x, e to the power x, etc., etc. Okay? And logarithm functions. Log base 2. Okay, log base 3. And ln x. All of these functions, we really want to study e to the power x extensively. We want to study ln x extensively. And all of these functions will be used in calculus course. Okay, so this is just in the first week. We review these materials. And what's coming next? Okay, what's coming next are the trig functions. Okay, trig functions, they are also the rules. Okay, so we're going to study trig functions. And you guys, of course, you heard about trig functions such as sine function, cosine function, tangent function, cotangent function, cosecant function, and secant function. And more trig functions, which are the arc sine function, right? Arc sine function, arc tangent function. Then you say, how about arc cotangent, arc cosecant, arc secant? Well, they're not used very much. So after all of these functions have been covered, our focus actually are pretty much sine, cosine, tangent, or arc sine, arc cosine, arc tangent. So that's our focus. So now you know that we're studying functions for the entire semester. And what else about these functions, right? So we now know the rules, right? We know the rules. After we study the rules, right, how they're defined, what kind of, for input, then we study domain of these functions and range of these functions. So the domain, of course, is all possible input, and the range, of course, is all possible output, right? For each one of these rules, we will study whether they are one-to-one, they are, are they increasing, are they decreasing, are they even, are they odd? We study all of these properties. And what else do we study about these functions, right? And the next thing we study about these functions is that sometimes we know the input and we want to find output. So input is known, we want to find output. Okay, so for these, we're going to graph these functions. We're going to graph all of these functions, all of these. Okay, we're going to graph all of these functions. In some other cases, we know the output, but we want to identify the input. So sometimes we don't know the input, but we know the output. And we're going to identify from the given output, we want to identify the input. So these are really the things we are looking for in this entire semester in a nutshell. And the first case, right, it will involve graphs, evaluate, etc. Okay, and the second category, that's something called equations. We're solving equations. If we only know the output, we don't know the input, and we'll be solving equations or inequalities. Okay, so that's the second category of questions. All of the mathematical questions we are doing in this semester is either from input to find output or from output to find input. Are they the third type? No, they're not the third type. For all of these functions, okay, we're going to study their graph, we're going to study their domain, we're going to study their range, I'm going to study how to evaluate them, of course. And we will also study, if given the output, how can we find the input? And that's solving equations or inequalities. Not only we're going to study all of these functions as they are, we will study the tweaks of their function, of these functions, such as shifting up, shifting down, shifting left, shifting right, right? And composition. After we study all of these simple functions, the next part we're going to study, what if we add functions and we subtract functions? For example, function a f plus g, f subtracting g, and f multiply g, right? And f divided by g. And what else there is? There's another very important topic is F composite G. And this is a big topic for your calculus classes, okay? Because you're going to see a lot of composition of these functions. So after we study all of these functions, and you know the graph, the domain, range, and the tweaks of these functions, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and composition of these functions, and tweaking of these functions. And for the exponential functions, and this will be the function you need to know very well. And this one, the ln x, will be the function you need to know very well. For the sine, cosine, tangent functions, you need to know the first three so very well. And these functions, you must know them very well. Then you say, how about these other, these functions? Well, they are there to help us introduce e to the power x. And these are there to help us introduce ln x. Eventually, we will all transition to e to the power x and ln x. So by the time we are at the door of calculus, you know all of these functions, which will be used in calculus. And you also know e to the power x, ln x, sine, cosine, tangent, arcsine, arccosine, arctangent. Occasionally, you may need to use these functions as well. Oops. Okay. And you will be ready to go. So all of our questions, once again, is either knowing the input for any one of the specific function to find output, or from output to identify input. Okay, so this is the course in a nutshell. Regarding textbook, okay, the way I deliver the course is really not rely on any particular textbook. Okay, I deliver the course. First, we studied these simple functions, and then we studied logarithm functions, and then we studied trig functions. In the first 4 weeks, we have touched all of these functions. And in the next 4 weeks, we're going to retouch all of these functions one more time from another perspective. Okay, so the first 4 weeks typically is from input to get output. And we still have from output to get input. And the next 4 weeks, and we have more of from output to get input. So we touch each topic twice. Hopefully we can prepare you very well for your calculus class. Take an example of homework questions. Okay, a lot of the questions I selected actually are calculus algebra. For example, these homework questions, okay, they are from calculus text. But I pick these questions just to do the algebraic part without using the calculus concept yet. So these algebraic skills are much required, and I hope you guys have some exposure to these kind of exercises, okay? So I highly encourage you to work on these questions, and of course I have examples in the homework guide. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I think that's all. Thank you for watching.